All right, folks. We can find our seats. That'd be fantastic. It's if I haven't met you already, my name is Jake Rogers. I have the honor of serving this school as the head of school, and also the honor of helping facilitate tonight's talk. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my own heart. I grew up in a K-12 independent school that was faith-based, though not a Catholic. Very much my parents raised me in a Christian evangelical home where Jesus was at the dinner table every night. And when I went off to college, I walked away from all of that for several years, both intellectually and in terms of my daily habits and practice. And through a journey that I'd be happy to tell you about at a later time, after a very long journey, eventually came back to my faith, and furthermore became a Catholic down the road, which my parents are still wrapping their heads around, but it's all good. So this is a topic that's very personal to me. And so what was really neat was today we were able to have a day in our high school where we had a career day, and our high schoolers went through different workshops on interviewing and here's how you prepare your resume, and here's how your social media should look like. And at the same time, they're hearing from alumni and from parents in different industries about their jobs and what they do for a living. So we spent this whole day doing a career day. And then at the end of it, we had a panel discussion on keeping your faith in college. And the goal of that for me as an educator was, A, for them to get some of this great content, but B, I just want them to be able to visualize themselves at that next level, to understand that there really are great communities, great resources available for them where they can find their people and they can live their faith in a community. And so it was a wonderful opportunity. I think tonight's talk will be a great opportunity as well. We're joined by some great guests today. So to my left here is Father Branson Hipp, and he is the chaplain of the Catholic Center at Georgia Tech. When I started at Pinecrest, honestly, his was one of the first names that was brought to me as someone in the area that I really need to get to know. Because Father Hipp is a great communicator, a very dynamic leader, and I think he's doing fantastic work at the Catholic Center. I've asked him to share some of the work that they do with you all as part of this presentation. We're also joined by Dr. Todd von Helms. So this is an interesting connection here. So Dr. von Helms is actually one of my professors as an undergraduate, and I can honestly tell you that, at least personally, I would not be here today but for a mentor like that who brought into my life at a very key and pivotal moment. And so, in addition to being a very accomplished scholar, you're a fellow at several universities. You've written a best-selling book called Before You Leave for College, Career, and Eternity. But in addition to that impressive list of accomplishments, you're also a dear friend and a great mentor. So thank you for being here. It's an honor to introduce you. It's so surreal. And then our Director of Campus Ministry, Emily Ronan, is going to moderate our discussion tonight. And so I asked Emily, gave her the privilege of introducing our alumni panel presenters. So Emily, could you come forward?
So, as Mr. Rogers said, my name is Emily Roman. I'm the Director of Campus Ministry here. And I've had the huge blessing of working at Pinecrest for nearly a decade. And in that time, I've gotten to know so many students, see them go off to college, see them start families. And as Mr. Rogers, this topic is also very close to my heart because I've seen all the possibilities of what happens to a Pinecrest alumni when they get out to college. Some of them make it a huge part of their college journey. Some of them decide to put that on the back burner while they kind of discover life. And so I was able to moderate the panel that we had earlier in the day for our high schoolers, and the questions that came to me in preparation, and that we're going to see a little bit of this evening as well, are questions that I think those alumni would have liked to have heard the answers to when they were the high school students being presented to as before they were alumni. And so now, I know I kind of put on my hat of all the conversations I have with parents of alumni. What do I hear from many parents over all of these years of what they wish they could have their child hear, what they themselves could know from those who were Pinecrest students and then beyond, as well as some experts here with us. So Hopefully tonight can be really enriching for you. And obviously there will be a time for Q&A at the end of our panel as well. So be thinking of any burning questions you have in your minds and hearts as you walk your walk as parents as well. So to introduce our alumni panelists, we have with us Rachel Dougal from the class of 2019. Rachel, after high school, decided to give a missionary year and served in Houston. Unfortunately, COVID cut that short, but then she was able to go to the University of Georgia, where she was studying education, switched to
Human Development and Family Science.
Human Development and Family Sciences. I never get that one right. So we're very happy to have Rachel joining us this evening. I failed to mention that Rachel, as well as Sebastian, were recipients of our Integer Award, which is our highest honor that we give to seniors, to a girl and a boy of each graduating class. It's kind of this award that we recognize that these students exemplify everything that Pinecrest stands for. So we're really blessed to have two of our Integer Award winners here. Rachel from the female winner for 2019, and Sebastian Santa Maria for our class of 2022. Sebastian, who just graduated, is getting his feet wet in the world of Georgia Tech and studying aerospace engineering, which I told him he was a nerd for, which is not fair, it's just because I'm not that smart. Sebastian's been getting involved with his faith in different aspects, and we thought that it could be really enriching to hear from someone who just jumped into the world of college and give his perspective as well from his experience. So before we kick off, I would like to invite Father Branson to open us with a prayer.
In the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Lord, thank you for us being here together. Thank you for the gift of this evening, for all those that are visiting, for the gift of these families, for the gift of their kids, especially as they go out to college. We ask that you send them your spirit in a deeper way for this evening, that we may know your will, and may follow your will and joy. We ask this in your heavenly name, as we say, glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. So I actually asked Dr. Todd to speak first.
Okay, all right, no pressure. Well, thank you so much for being here. It is an honor for the alumni. What you say will probably carry a lot more weight than these older guys might say. But you know, it really does take a village to raise each child, does it not? And when I'm at a school like this, it really gives me hope. It really gives me hope because these are people who love the Lord supremely. They're called to be here, and they're mentors for each child, and each child is different. And Jake Rogers and I mean, it's hilarious, but I was called to be his mentor at one point because someone said, hey, you need to meet each other, and this kid's struggling with his faith. And so we would meet weekly, and he would ask questions that I didn't know the answer to, and I found them. But anyways, iron sharpens iron, and mentoring, being a mentor, having mentors, it is so imperative. But to know, as a parent here, that each one of your children has a room of mentors who love them. And that's really what gives me hope. You know, when we think about the resurrection of Christ in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says that if this didn't happen, we should be pitied, right? But the fact that Christ is risen, and the fact that as Christians, there's never a moment throughout any day, no matter what college we go to, no matter what vocation afterwards, that we're not in the presence of the risen Lord, who has been through, he's overcome anything that we'll ever accomplish, and that he's with us always. That's absolutely beautiful. And as Emily said to me earlier before this started, that he wants the salvation of his children more than we do, right? But yet he uses us in that process of living out the faith. And I want to share this as an example. So I was a chaplain at an Episcopal school in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I blame this guy for suggesting that I be the chaplain there because he was teaching literature there. Well, my first day on the job, or actually it was a couple of weeks into the job, these two boys came up to me and said, so you're the chaplain? I said, yeah. They said, well, we're atheists. And I said, that's great. I look forward to hearing about how you arrived at that belief system. And so for two more years, sophomore, junior, senior year, they would sit in chapel and halfway pay attention, and they would argue in class, and they would play devil's advocate. And I always wondered, how did they end up there? But it's because God had a plan for their life. So senior year, these two boys come up to me, unbeknownst to one another, a few hours apart, and the one kid, his name is Chi, And I said, Chi, you've been here for years. He said, yeah. And I said, and you've been one of the most outspoken atheists. And I just said, where are you now in your journey? He said, well, that's kind of one reason why I didn't come by. He said, I'm really starting to be sad about leaving this place. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, I know I'm a knucklehead in class and I'm always arguing different points. And I said, well, it's actually good for the Christians here to hear that. And he said, I think I'm agnostic now. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, well, it's been easy to be around peers and others that, sing in chapel, praise the Lord, as St. James says, you're praising the Lord one moment and you're cursing those made in his image. He said, and I would see the hypocrisy in my friends. But I could never get past the fact that I had a handful of friends in every single one of the staff and faculty here that they were living out what they said they believed. And that has made Christianity compelling. And I said, well, gee, you're always reading. What was it that you read? What's the favorite work? And he said, oh, easy St. Augustine's Confessions. And I said, well, why is that? He says, because he was just on this journey. And he just ran wild. But yet the Lord pursued him. And what a lot of people don't know is he had his mother, Monica, that prayed through tears for many years and never gave up. And then later when he meets Ambrose and the eloquent preaching that, Augustine, we know the rest of the story. But you think about the importance of prayer in these students' life. She is still on that journey. The other kid named Kevin, after being on the island of Patmos on our senior trip, walking in the footsteps of St. Paul, but then St. John, we were in the cave where he received revelation. And within 30 minutes later, one of the peers, one of the student chaplains, led him to Christ. So God is always at work, and for two students in that context that we thought, oh, they're just being knuckleheads, they'll never come to the faith, we should never give up. And we should always be praying for them and just knowing that God's plan is better than ours. And so I just wanted to start with that. We've got a lot of other things to cover with, but we'll come back around. I know you're going to have some questions about a lot of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and just to build on that, so I'm at the Georgia Tech Catholic Center. This is my 4th year there. I love it. I love being on a college campus. I love working with college students. I love being in a place of education where people are more open to learning. It's a beautiful spot to be in. And it's really, really exciting because we just had an Easter vigil not this past Sunday, but the Saturday night before, where we welcomed like 18 people into the faith. And to see like the joy on their faces and how alive they were was really astonishing. And remembering this line from this Roman rhetorician named Marius Victorinus, who converted in the time of St. Augustine, who said, when I encountered Christ, I discovered myself a man. Like I discovered my humanity. Like he actually made life more alive. I know who I am because of this encounter with him. So it's fascinating for me because what I see is the students that encounter Christ and are striving to live the faith imperfectly, but discover life to be more alive, that it's more full, like it has this deeper dimension. And the drifting away from him for like whatever reason brings this sense of like dullness or nothingness in front of life. I think we've all experienced in one way or another. And it's often hard to like recognize or name, but in the drifting off, this like sense of nothingness, or that like life has like less color. So it's a beautiful spot, and I have a lot of hope, even on like a state school or like a secular campus, because I think I see the difference. And even this recognition of what you were hitting upon too, but like that like man is made to be pilgrim. Like Dougal Marcel says, like homo viator, or like wayfarer, right? We often like think of life as, once I check these boxes, once I get to this point, once I like even overcome this sin and have these practices in place, I'll be good, and then I can just kind of settle. And once you get to that point, it's actually not satisfactory, and it doesn't work, because structurally as human beings we're made for like the infinite, and we're made to like walk a road, this like unending like work of conversion. All of our life is pilgrimage. And so it's fun for me to be in a place where you can live pilgrimage in this very intentional way and live life as a journey and be faithful to the questions. So some of the things that we do at the Catholic Center, like we have daily Mass and an hour of confession before every Mass. That way there's a chance to begin again, right? Often when we mess up, we can kind of slide into despair and just be like, well, like I messed up, so I'm stuck in it, and just like so then it's like I might as well just go for it and distract myself, and it like becomes more and more dissatisfactory. And then you want to numb yourself from the more and more like dissatisfactory. So to give a space to begin again right away is crucial. To be able to start over immediately is so important. But we have a really beautiful community, and really we have an adoration chapel, and students will commit to an hour of adoration from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. And that's one of the places that I find most transformative is the time of silence with the Lord, and they actually really learn how to have a deep prayer life. That part also is really, really important. But then also community life as well, authentically sharing life together. I didn't mention this earlier, but like our flag football team won intramurals, which was great. Especially playing against some of the more like rough fraternities. It was fun. But like authentically sharing life together. But then also we break things up of like community life, liturgy. So the students run just about everything with like worship as well, as far as like musicians, altar servers, everything. And then outreach. So we do a lot of like homeless ministry. We work with local organizations. We also do like on-campus outreach. There's a lot of like loneliness and isolation. And so trying to like reach the greater community so people can live this experience of community. And then faith formation, of like growing in the faith. And it's one of the things I'm like most fascinated by and excited about. So like we did a night where we brought in an astronomy professor who's become like a friend of the Catholic Center. And so he talked about the unfolding of supernovas and how that happens and how we wouldn't exist without them. I said a few words about the stars and wonder and awe and desire and Dante and all these things. And then we went together to the observatory and looked at the stars afterwards. Like 60 students came. And we had this beautiful night. But to show this like integrated thing of like if the way that God saves us is his method is by becoming man, if that's his method, then our humanity actually matters. And you can't go around the fact of the incarnation of his method. Right? So Marius Victorine is saying, when I encountered Christ, I discovered myself a man. And often so many of our problems is actually trying to live Christianity away from our humanity, or like to not, like just almost to be like angels, right? Instead of like to be human. And then that's the way that God saves us. So striving to like live our humanity well together has been just a really beautiful experience, and a lot of like room for them to grow, to learn, to be educated. It's a really fun spot. So that's some of the things that we're doing. I'm sure there's space for questions there.
So speaking to that concept of community, in the earlier panel, I think it was you, Dr. von Helms, who talked about that the two demographics that are the loneliest are those who are entering college and those who are entering nursing homes.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's right.
So those who just recently entered college or more recently entered college, would you agree with that statement? But then also, how did you find your community on the college campus?
I mean, absolutely, I agree. So when I entered college, one of the biggest things was also, like you said, feeling lonely. And I kind of like wanted to like, you know, where's my group of people? Where are the people that I can connect with? Where is my home here? I'm far away, and like, I just kind of want to like feel like I belong somewhere. And I was blessed to grow up with like a family where God was a center. So when I looked for home, I knew exactly where to look, and that was the GT Catholic Center. And that's where I found my group of people, an encounter group I'm part of, and I'm able to go to there, go to church whenever I need to, and every weekend when I'm at GT. So for me, like having that Catholic Center so nearby really helped, like, with that feeling of loneliness, I guess.
Yeah, that's good.
I didn't know that statistic, and I definitely agree. That is so true. I also entered college in the midst of COVID, so that was like an added layer of loneliness, because no one was on campus. All of our classes were online pretty much, and if we did have class in person, it was like once a week. And it was optional too. So of course, I was dying for human interaction. And to be completely honest, like I was really struggling, and I actually started counseling because I was so lonely. It is not easy, and I think it's something that no one really talks about. Everyone's just super excited about, oh, where are you going? What are you going to study? It's going to be so fun. But it is a harsh reality because, especially for me, coming from a community like Pinecrest, where everyone knows you, everyone loves you, everyone cares about you, and going into a huge school, I go to UGA, so there are 30,000 other students there, and you are just like a drop in the ocean. But the most important thing for me was first just finding good friends. I was very blessed to have awesome roommates, especially with the COVID parameters. Like, we weren't really allowed to even meet other people in the dorm. You couldn't even actually eat inside of the dining halls for a period of time. It was very difficult. But the one community that actually was still having events was the Catholic Center at UGA. And it did, to be completely honest, it took me a while to feel at home there. Because in a community that is so tight-knit, it can feel like a bubble, and it's hard to enter into that bubble, especially if you're not there all the time. That's one of the hard realities of the UGA Catholic Center, but it has become my home, and that is where all my closest friends are. But additionally, I think I was able to combat that loneliness with just mentorship too, and investing in the people who already did know me, so friends from high school that, especially, again, coming from Pinecrest, so many close relationships. Some of my best friends were there for me, and I'm super grateful I was able to lean on them. And also mentors like Emily, who's known me since I was a little 7th grader, a counselor, spiritual directors, using the resources that Pinecrest provided for me was also really beneficial for me. But once I was able to fully enter into the Catholic Center community, that was my safe space for sure.
You like that?
Yeah, I think even like encouraging, because it is always difficult at the beginning, and it's just one of the first major transitions going into college, right? And so we forget that things take time. Like, we forget, and I think especially in the modern world where, Amazon Prime and like sometimes even day of, there's such an immediacy that we forget the dynamic of time. And so even this like patience and willing to like risk oneself to get plugged into the community, because I think it's difficult to enter into any community through no fault of anybody, even the best ones. It can be difficult to plug into just because it's a problem of time, and that can almost scandalize us, like the fact that like things take time. But it does happen if we like stick with it.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think the importance of having those mentors, in addition like to the Catholic Center or other parachurch groups that are on those campuses. But, there are several people that our oldest son is in New York City, he's a junior, and there are people that we know that love him, that pray for him often. And he knows he can call them anytime and nothing's off limits. And it's interesting because, what we hope for with our children is that, as they get older, we become wiser. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it does not. But it's interesting how when I speak to these mentors that check on him and pray for him, I said, you don't tell me the details, but just a brief update, how's he doing? And they'll say, I'll say something, and he'll say, well, that's what my dad said, that's what my mom said. But yet when it comes from someone else, for whatever reason, they tend to hear it and respond. And so I would just say to even before they leave, identify those people that you can really ask to be intentional to pray for your children and to really be there for them, to be available all the time. I just think it's just so helpful. And I don't know if you can hear the statistic, but the one thing I came across, the 2 loneliest segments of people in America are those entering colleges and entering nursing homes, and so, but they don't have to be. So thanks for what y'all shared about that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So again, directing this more to our alumni, but definitely want to hear from our other 2 panelists. You guys are involved in your Catholic Center. You have friends who also graduated from here with you, who aren't, maybe not, right? Maybe not involved in their faith or something like that. Maybe they are. Maybe all of your friends are. I could be wrong. But if a friend decides to kind of go off on a different path, or maybe even you don't have to share personally, kind of trip and fall, right, in your journey through college, right? College presents you with a lot of new realities, trying things out, etc. What is a way that you've seen those friends, or just those friends come back, or what has helped them to kind of make their way back into the fold, if you've seen that happen? I think Rachel can go first. She looks ready.
Gosh, I think the most important thing, in my experience, is just being a presence of love and non-judgment. It's very easy, especially in Christian circles, to just see people fall away from the church, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions. And I think the most important thing is, rather than viewing, like, even check yourself is the most important thing. Like, as parents, if you don't, like, you're checking Life 360 on Sunday, are they on Mass, are they on Mass, and they're not. I think one of the most important things is also just realizing they're adults and they're going to make their own decisions, and you did your best raising your kid, like, but at the end of the day, they're an adult and they're going to make their own decisions. You can't force anything on them. I mean, you can try, but, like, they're going to do what they want to do. So for me, in my experience, yeah, not all of my friends, even my best friends from Pinecrest, they're not really practicing their faith anymore. And at least what I strive to do is to just be a positive example of someone in the church for them. Because a lot of the people who fall away, whether it's just actions that they take, opinions that they have that differ from the church's, life experiences, etc., they automatically assume they're going to be judged. And that is not the way Christ would view them at all. So why should we view them that way? And I know a lot of people, the judgment isn't necessarily coming from a place of judgment, but it is perceived as judgment. So for me, I try my best to not be the one speaking, but rather the one listening. Because again, what did Jesus do? Yes, he called people out and he spoke truth into them, but first he listened and he healed, rather than, like, for the woman who committed adultery, what did he do? He didn't throw the stone at her. He was the only one who could have thrown the stone at her. But did he throw the stone? No, he said, your sins are forgiven, go in peace. So I try to follow what Christ does in that way of, obviously, I'm not going to go do those things with them. Like, I'm not going to participate, but still just being someone who is reaching out and being a good influence is the most important thing. So they know, at the end of the day, if they are hitting rock bottom, they're at the lowest of the low, they know they can come to you. Whether that's as a friend, as a parent, as a sibling, the most important thing is they know you will never leave them, you will never judge them or abandon them. So that's my approach.
That's great.
Thanks.
Regrettably, I don't have nearly as much experience with that. Strangely enough, I actually have, like, almost the opposite effect, which is what was going on close to me. One of my closest people that came with me from Pinecrest originally wasn't Catholic, and over time and keeping the door open with invitation and just letting, like, stuff happen on its own. Now he's just seriously considering joining the Catholic faith, and I think that's awesome. But yeah, it's not exactly what
That also happens on college campuses, guys.
it happens. Yeah.
That's great.
So that's honestly what's really cool about what Catholic Center is doing, and I wasn't there to witness it, but I know there's a lot of people who entered church at GT on Easter, which is pretty cool. But yeah.
Would you like to add something?
Yeah, well said. I just think about grace, unmerited favor, and the grace that we've received, and how we're supposed to forgive as we've been forgiven. And I think to just meet people where they are, knowing that they're on a journey, and these things that they're hearing and parodying or whatever's happening that is so antithetical to the faith and crazy, you just realize that, they're struggling, and that only Christ can truly remedy those thoughts and the things that are there. And then they just get bigger, and then they're adults with some of the same questions, and they didn't have a place where they could go where it was safe. It's okay to not be okay and to ask those questions. And a prime example, I was speaking at a country club on a beach on the East Coast. I know it sounds weird, but I'm there, and I'd spoken there a couple years ago, and it's the older crowd. It's, not to offend anybody, but everyone there was gray hair, or at least they have hair, right? So I show up for the second time to speak there, and we're about to start, And there's no one in the room under 70, I think. And all of a sudden, these 12 girls come in together, and they're all like in their 20s. Most of them are tatted up and have piercings and stuff. And I thought, wow, this is great. I'm glad they're here. And so I was just talking about grace, and I said, the culture is trying to define who you are. And it's not who God says that you are. And Sprite, obey your thirst. Well, if we obey our thirst, we would be in trouble. That's one of the problems of what we're dealing with. I mean, think about advertising. Their goal is to convince you to buy something that you don't need and probably can't afford. And that's just the culture that we live in. But then you look at the alternative, you look at the truth, you look at Christ saying that I'll set you free. You'll come to know the truth, I'll set you free. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. But it's so beautiful when you look at the Psalm 139. It says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. That you and I are the thoughts of God, that we're cherished and like no other. And so I was just sharing this with this group, and I looked at these girls, and half of them are doing this, and they're wiping tears, and they're crying. So when it was over, I said, hey, if you have questions, come up and talk to me. And so two of them made a beeline to me. And I said, I am so glad that you were here today. I said, are you members of this country club? And they said, no, we don't. And I said, well, are you members of a church group? And they said, no, we don't go to church either. And I said, well, I'm glad you're here, but how'd you get here? They said, well, someone came over, we're in a rehab program. And we're all addicts, and we've been in this for months. And someone came in this morning at breakfast and said someone's speaking up the road, and we're invited to come. We can go as a group and have a free meal afterwards, which is really why I think they came. But they heard about grace. I said, what was it that I said that made you emotional? And these two girls just started crying, and they said, I just cannot believe that God would love me the way that I am for what I've done. And I would never go to a church because I felt like they would judge me. And I think a lot of times with the young people, that's how they feel, even though we know it's not true, and we welcome with open arms and that. But sometimes through the peers of someone just saying, hey, would you come with me? And I'm sure you've seen it. You invite someone to come from the peers. And it's amazing how God will use you. God works through his people. And he works through prayer. It can do more in seconds than we can do in years. So if we're committed to prayer, we provide the safe spaces, that we're letting the Lord work through us. It's unbelievable what God can accomplish. And those ones that we thought maybe were estranged and would never come back to the faith, sometimes even the most skeptical of people historically just look at it. They become some of the most outspoken and eloquent and articulate witnesses, evangelists for the faith, whether it was a St. Augustine or C.S. Lewis or whomever. But to just to know they're on a journey and to encourage them and to pray for them and to walk alongside them. That really is what all this is about, right?
Yeah, building off of all of that, of even the experiences like Jesus in front of Zacchaeus, Luke 19. Zacchaeus, who's the worst guy in town and nobody likes because he has taken advantage of them historically. Jesus says, I must stay with you. First, to be with the man, I must stay with you. The gospel is actually very clear that he intends to pass through the town. But he drops everything for the worst guy. He says, I must stay with you. And in that, Zacchaeus changes. So this first thing, coming to your point, Rachel, of first staying, loving the person, and I must stay with you. Second, this openness and fearlessness in front of reality, if it's true, so we can look honestly at things and not with a defensive posture, which is our tendency in front of those that we love, especially out of fear, but to be able to look really honestly at things. And in fact, recognizing that the questions and the struggles are actually the road through which we are changed. One of my favorite lines is from Priesthood Reforming once, he said, unless you have a question or a problem, you're not living dramatically the relationship with Christ. We think of questions and problems as bad things, and that the goal of life is to eliminate them. If you have a question, that means you're uncertain. That's not good, which is not true, right? If you have a problem, get rid of it, and then life will be good. The origin of the word problem, proballo, means to throw forward, meaning it moves you forward in life. And so I think for many of us that are older, we look back on our life, and the most important times were the most difficult, right? They were actually the most painful, the time of greatest questioning and suffering. So if that's true in front of us, why wouldn't it be true in front of them as well? And so to recognize the circumstances as given from God and actually important and matter, and instead of trying to eliminate them right away, greater fidelity to the question or the problem. I look back on my really skeptical phase when I'd gotten into modern philosophy and I was really wrestling with everything. And I look back at that time of such gratitude for my friends that stayed with me in it. And like, it just makes me love, like, one, the faith more, but whenever a skeptical student is in front of me, I like am able to listen with great freedom and be like, yeah, I get it, right? Like, there's actually like a great joy there, and the road becomes like a friend. And so again, it goes back to like being pilgrim, being wayfarer. And so part of it, if Christ is our companionship on the road, leading us to the Father continually, then we are called in front of others to live this companionship with them, to help them to walk a road. But they have to walk the road, right? But the way that we can help is by us being in front of our questions and our problems honestly, and following those and taking those seriously and allowing them to change us. That part is crucial. Then we can actually walk with them, because one, we know what the road looks like, but two, we're not scandalized by the difficulty of it and the suffering and the questions, which often, especially in front of those that we love, we are so scandalized by the fact that it takes a road, and we want to dodge it. We want to, like, as T.S. Eliot says, to create a system so perfect, no one needs to be good. That's like the modern project in a lot of ways, is to dodge this thing of going on pilgrimage. So like, our role is to, like, with a lot of love and mercy, like, one, look upon people with the eyes of Jesus towards the He is, if I must stay with you, but then to help them to walk a road, like life as pilgrimage. Like, that's at the heart of what this is.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. Such great answers all around. Building on that sort of sense of judgment, or folks who are in a different place than you, I think that sometimes the mortal sin of our culture now is to be judgmental, or at least to be perceived as judgmental. I've had more people be more concerned, more folks of these people's age, be more concerned with being perceived as judgmental than anything else. And so I guess my question for all panelists would be, how have you, Rachel kind of started to answer that, how have you, or give an example of someone who you've seen welcome someone who thinks something completely different or is in a very different place, while holding true to who you are, but welcoming where they are? Would that be Rachel?
I guess so. Well, I think the most important thing is to just not try to push an agenda initially. I think we always want to be right, and the reality is sometimes we aren't right. I think that's a hard reality to realize. But in addition, in my experience at least, and from what I know about culture and society, if the whole conversation is just about trying to prove a point, the other person isn't going to receive that 9 times out of 10. And so just creating a safe space and an open space for conversation, for questions. For example, like, I'm Catholic and I would go to an SEC school. Most people are not Catholic. We've got a lot of Protestants at UGA, and that's the reality. And so I've been able to, like, have conversations about, oh, you're Catholic. What do you believe about this? What do you think about this? Do we agree here and there? And rather than it being me trying to prove my point is correct or them trying to prove their point is correct, just creating, like, an open conversation is the most important thing. So that can be for even things of faith, but also when it comes to other things like falling away from the faith, I think it's really important to just create a conversation. And something that came to mind earlier as you guys were discussing was just St. Francis of Assisi has a quote where it says, what is it? Preach the gospel and if necessary, use words. So I think the most important thing, at least for myself, is to live according to my faith. Like you said, the most important and jarring thing is for people who aren't Christian to see Christians actually living as Christians the way that Christ calls us to live. And when people see that, they're in awe of that. When they see, wait, you're not judging me because I go out, you're not judging me because I do X, Y, Z, but you still love me, but you don't join me in these things, and it blows them away. Or even for me, one of my suite mates my freshman year, she came into college with no religion at all, didn't really know if she believed in God, and through my example and my other Christian friend's example, she actually is Christian now and believes in the Lord and is trying to figure out which path she wants to continue on. But she wouldn't be where she is if she hadn't had friends who were willing to talk about their faith and willing to just love her despite her differences. And I think another thing is also just inviting people into religious spaces is huge, or also just inviting them into conversation. So, for example, like at the Catholic Center, oh, are you coming to Mass with me? Come to Mass with me. Oh, we have praise and worship. Do you want to join? That's one of the best ways. And just never growing tired of an invitation into that conversation or those kinds of events is really important, because eventually they will say yes.
Very similar to what you said. I think there's three main ways to like take that kind of situation. Number one is to listen. A lot of people, if they have a different belief than you, the first thing they expect when they start talking to someone that doesn't believe what they believe is just confrontation. Something like a little war, or like just going against each other, and they feel like they have to win immediately. But if you take a step back and listen and like give them a chance to kind of explain themselves, it changes the entire like mood or personality that goes on in that kind of conversation. Number two is to be like welcoming, have an open door. Like Rachel said, like invite them to come to church with them, or to come to church with you, and like invite them to be a part of your community. And it can work both ways. So if they invite you too, like take that invitation with like open hands, just accept it. See what their point of view is like, what their perspective is like, so that they can be the same way with you. And it's helpful to have that kind of like, I understand you, you understand me, and then maybe you can reach common ground. And then like, if all goes well, even better than that. And the third thing is leading by example. So like, really show what you believe in, and like show that you really think this is like the way you should live, and that you take this stuff to heart. So when they see you, like Rachel said, carrying this out, they actually realize like you take this seriously. There's some like truth behind it. So that's one really big thing, is just like being a great example of God and being Jesus to those people.
Yeah, it's interesting just because I think it reveals kind of how existentially lost we are, where disagreement becomes like a condemnation, right? It's fascinating because if I'm learning something and somebody says like, hey, not this way, that way, I wouldn't take that as my being condemned, right? It's like, oh, like you're actually trying to help me because I want to be better at this thing. So one, it's fascinating that I think it reveals how like lost we are in the modern world, that any type of disagreement or even like, hey, like this is actually not good, can come across as like judgmentalism and like condemnation, right? That's not how it's supposed to be, but like it is like kind of the world where we are. And so it's a fascinating thing because like there's specific points where like, at least from my experience, like you have to say things, When my niece tried to eat a dishwasher tablet, we didn't say like, let her make her decisions, like, now granted she's a toddler, but like you see the point of like, there are specific moments where like loving a person well is actually saying something, right? It's always easier when like they do know that you love them, but there are spaces, and so that's part of the like navigating it and discerning it. But it actually, I think any problem that we have in living the faith, especially, is why I love like being in a state school and all these things, is the problem reveals something about the way people live and what they believe. And so I think even like you said, like the greatest fear is judgmentalism, and one that's like justified in the sense of like what like people do feel condemned or they feel excluded because of it. But it also does reveal how existentially lost people are, where someone saying, no, that's not good, becomes a condemnation. So it reveals something that we are like lost as people in the modern world. And so that actually, we have something very beautiful to offer in the world of like, no, like who you are is loved. Like we're made to be sons and daughters in the Son. So even that, again, like I think that the problem always reveals something fascinating and beautiful. And the way that I was educated to see reality in that way was through my Catholic faith. So that even the thing that seems to be the enemy is not the enemy, it's a friend in a very unique way, which St. Paul says so dramatically, like what can separate us from the love of Christ, right? Like the circumstances are not against us. So all of these things even are this like education and learning how to love, right? Which is not automatic. It's not an on and off switch. So I'm like really fascinated by all of these things. And I think it's super interesting the way people are in front of these things where like potential correction is always interpreted as judgmentalism. So it means that like one, we do need to be more gentle, but we need to help people know who they are. Because there's certain people when they're like, hey, that was really dumb, I'm like, yeah, you're right. And I know like the Lord does this to me in prayer all the time, and I know he loves me. He's saying it because he loves me. And I'm like, you're right, like that's it. Right? Like Jesus corrects Peter all the time. It's because he loves him. But like in the modern culture, we're not there in a lot of ways. So there's this like, there's this like working with it that has to happen.
I hear people every week telling me how concerned they are with our culture, where the country's headed, what's going to happen, all those things, and they're just really despondent. And these are people that are believers that I've known for years, and they're so strong in their faith. And I think about it, and I too am concerned, especially going to college campuses and high school, secular context and that. But yet when I think about Matthew 5, when Jesus says to be salt and light, well, where is light most evident? But in darkness. So as it becomes what appears to be spiritually darker, we have that much of a greater opportunity to shine more brightly for Christ. And we do that with our words. And sometimes those words of truth, and even from a friend, they can really sting. But when they're done in love, people will know our intention, and we have no control over what the reaction may be. But the young people have such an opportunity to be salt and to be light, and to share the gospel, because that is what has the power to save. And so I would just say to you, as well as all, just continue to be bold. It's interesting. One of Mr. Roger and I's former students, who's now a junior at the University of Georgia, he's in a fraternity. So this kid, great Christian home, goes to Georgia, and he thinks, I just need to go and drink and do the fraternity thing. And so it's so uncharacteristic of him, and he kind of goes down that path a little bit. And then he has one upperclassman in that fraternity that said, you know what? I came here, I was a dry pledge. And I told this fraternity, this is who I am. When I'm of age at 21, I may have a beer, but if you don't want me, it's fine, but this is what I'm going to be. So the powers that be said, this guy's confident. He knows what he believes. This kid has been the one to stand up. And so now the kid that he and I both know, now as a junior, is actually leading a Bible study. The first time I went to speak there last year, there were 10 guys. The second time there were 50. One of those guys there was visiting from another fraternity. That guy is now leading a Bible study in his fraternity as he just came into the faith himself about 6 months ago. But it all came back to having teachers, having people that planted those seeds. Paul says that some are planting, some are watering, and God brings the growth. And what we know is that God will bring the growth, and he'll use the prayers of the saints, of his people, to do that and to be there, to meet them where they are, and to just speak truth and love.
To add on to that, I think it's easy for parents and just students in general to be fearful of entering into spaces like that.
Yeah.
But when we need people to enter into those spaces, the spaces where people are just so lost. How can we help each other if we're not entering those spaces?
Right.
So that's a beautiful testament of that. And I think, especially for parents, sending your kids off, it can be scary to know your kid wants to go into Greek life. That could be terrifying.
Yeah.
But we need good people in Greek life. We need good people in the classroom who are willing to have open discussions with their professors when they're teaching things that they don't agree with.
And I wasn't in Greek life in college at the University of Texas, but so when he invited me to come, I have to admit I was a little bit nervous and not know what to expect. But what I've realized is these students are really hungering for truth. They're hungering for people to come in and meet them where they are. A lot of them are reluctant to want to go to church or some organized, and that's okay. Maybe they'll come around, but they will listen to their peers. And when you provide that space, and for us as adults, sometimes we just need to go into their territory and space. And then once the Spirit moves and they're ready, then they can show up. But it happens and it works, and it really does start with you guys. And it's what a blessing to be on this panel, for these alumni to be here to share these things. So thank you.
So speaking of our parents, sure they're wanting to know what the magic formula is. How do you raise your kid through high school so that everything goes well for them the rest of their life? What's the answer to that? Are you listening? Sorry, there isn't one, actually. But I would ask our alumni to think about, in your own experience, you can expose your parents to the right here, okay? Or of your friends' parents as well, friends' parents. But also for our other panelists to think of what are patterns that you see? What are things that your parents have done or not done for you, or for kids that you know, to set them up to have a positive experience of living their faith in college? So anyone wants to take a crack initially?
I think there's two things. Number one, it goes back to the loneliness statistic. Sorry. Because for me, like, when I entered college, obviously, like, I wanted to know where my group was. And the number one thing it told me, obviously, was, like, where was home? And I knew that God was at home. So when I wanted to find home, I went to God. The best thing that my parents could have done for me was, the first thing is keeping God at the center of the family. And that's what, like, made me feel at home the most. I'm saying this home thing over and over again, but that's, like, the idea. So when I was, like, at college and I didn't know what to do, where do I go, where do I find these people, I get a text from a friend who also graduated from Pinecrest and is in Georgia Tech. And he invites me to join his encounter group at Georgia Tech in the Catholic Center. And that's when I knew, like, oh, that's where I can be, that's where I can find my group of people. And I've stayed in that encounter group with those, I think, 7 guys, and we meet every single week. And I feel close to God, I feel close to them, and I know, like, what my group of people is that I can go to with all my problems and all my stuff that I have to work with every single day. They're in the same boat that I am in. And it all starts with that, like, one realization that where I want to go to, like, not be lonely and to, like, find people is home, and it's God. So that, like, connection really helped. And the second thing goes back to one of the first things that we talked about. I think you mentioned the village. My family sent me here to Pinecrest, and that's where I found the village. And from that village, graduated a lot of other people that went to my same school, and I found those people too. Like I said, my friend, I don't know, you probably guys know him, Anthony Burrows, this awesome guy. He leads my encounter group, and he reached out to me, and he was that, like, connection to a small bubble that, like Rachel said, is very difficult to get into. And it, from the start of me joining college, really helped me in my faith and my journey. So, like the previous thing, the home, it all connects back to a decision my parents made, was sending me to this school, and introducing me to this village, this family, and giving me the connections that I need to find God later on in life and in college. That's it.
I think the most important thing for myself is just a personal relationship with Christ. And that's something that I didn't really know about or learn about or have until I came to Pinecrest. And through Pinecrest, I was able to get involved in Challenge and ECYD, Regnum Christi stuff. So I contribute my whole walk of faith to ECYD, to that very first 7th grade retreat I went on, because that was the first time I had this realization of God sacrificed his only son to die for me. Like, this isn't just a thing we do on Sundays only, it's all the time, and he did it for me, and he loves me and wants a relationship with me. And so I think it can be easy for kids to only see church as a routine, as part of culture, as something that you do. And I think the most important thing is just hammering it in, like, this isn't just about theology, it's about a relationship. And that is what brings me back. Because, to be honest, like, church can be annoying. Or, like, having to, learn about the church or all of the beliefs the church has. They can be difficult teachings to understand why the church says what it does. Or, the walk of faith is not an easy one. But the most important thing in my experience was just having that foundation of relationship and friendship with Christ. And in that also came relationship with my friends, peers my age, who also are on the same page. So when I think they say, you are a combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I don't know if you guys have heard that before, but it all also comes down to community. Who are you spending your time with? And I was blessed to have a beautiful group of friends in high school and my time at Pinecrest, and also in my transition to college. And I think that's a huge part of it. And then additionally, having mentors, big sisters, like challenge team leaders, consecrated spiritual directors, priests, and parents, people who I can look up to and know that they want to support me no matter what that I do.
One example, I'm not a morning person. I remember Charles Spurgeon, this British theologian, that said it should be the duty of every person to seek the face of God each morning before anyone else. And if you're like me, you've got the cell phone on the nightstand and you grab it and you get bombarded. So I do try to say a prayer every morning before I get up. And on this particular Saturday morning, our 4-year-old comes in, jumps on the bed, is ready to play whatever. And I said, go ask Mom what's for breakfast. So he goes down and hears his little feet going down the stairs and comes back up. And I said, what are we having? And he's like, I said, go ask her. So he goes back, comes back in, and I said, Jake, what did she say? And he says, I didn't ask her. And I said, why not? And he said, because she's praying. And so our little 4-year-old saw his mom praying for him. And he sees her every morning journaling, reading the scriptures, and that's how she starts her day. And he needed to see that. And now that he's 14, we've seen him spending time by himself with the Lord in the morning. And he saw that from his mom. And so I say, as parents here, as moms and dads, we pray for our kids, but they also need to see us living out that faith, not to impress anyone, but just to petition God for their well-being, and just to, in the times where we don't feel like going to Mass or church or Bible study, but to do it because the younger people especially, they need to see the faith lived out. And when they do with consistency, despite our flaws, it's compelling, it becomes contagious, and it's giving them something to follow. And that's what our world desperately needs, is people who are authentically living out their faith.
Yeah, one more just like historical example of that is from Ratzinger, writing about this truth and tolerance. We talked about the experience of St. Augustine, who originally falling in love with the rhetoric with Cicero, discovering that there's more to life and greater beauty and everything, the possibility of God. He's like, I need to look at the Bible. He reads the Bible for the first time and he was horrified by it. He thought it was barbaric, and he thought it wasn't nearly as good as the other things that he had read. And Ratzinger, writing about this, said he needed to meet a man. He needed to meet Ambrose, who the bishop of Milan, who lived these things in his flesh and blood. And Augustine would go and sit and listen to Ambrose speak. And then he fell in love with the scripture and all of his journey. But you see, it needs to be made flesh in a person that walks with you. We were just talking about encountering Christ, but through this place, right? So it's the personal relationship with Christ, but it takes the flesh of another. Right, this is the method of God. This is the mystery of the church, a redeemed humanity through which you encounter the face of Christ. How he does that is often very, very mysterious and not the way that we think. I think we often desire that, especially for our kids, that it will happen entirely through us, but we're just one part of the body of Christ. So especially some of my students that I see are it's just not clicking. My prayer is that they encounter Christ and not necessarily through me, right? That way, anything hopefully they will, right? But fidelity to the person of Christ acting in their life. My big thing with the students is even talking about evangelization, we almost want to just put God in their life, but that can almost be an action of violence, because the thing is, God is working in the life of every human being already. He loves them more than we do. So the interesting question is, what is he doing? And that's a different skill set, and it actually invites to fidelity and attentiveness. What is he doing? Fascinating. And then it becomes a lot more interesting and free. Free in the sense of your own personal stake is on it. It's no, he's working. What's he doing? And helping them to be faithful to that. And I think that is the road that we're called to walk.
Excellent. So our parents and students as well, do you have any questions for our panelists so far? Don't all talk like that once. Just go ahead.
I think one of the common misconceptions that I hear from students, particularly in college, is I want to have a normal college experience. And there seems to be a contradiction between, like, you can't have both. You can't have the normal college experience and also live a life of faith. So could you maybe just give some peace of mind, some validation that it is, like, these are pretty cool kids too. These are not kind of these nerdy kids who just hang out at a chapel and pray all day, every day, right? Like, you also have some fun, and it is possible to sort of have both, right? I hope.
Worth asking.
I'm glad you asked that because I was trying to find the right time to say, like, you don't have to be a weirdo to practice your faith. Because I feel like a lot of kids in high school see people practicing their faith in college, and they just think of like people who are like, or at least for girls, like they're overly modest, like they don't wear the clothes that everyone else wears, like they don't go out, they don't do this and that. Like, guys, I'm wearing my crop top right now, like a modest crop top, but yeah, if I reach up, goes to my belly, like you. Anyway. Yeah, I think the stereotype, actually one of my friends, she's from here and goes to St. Brendan's. Her brother is a freshman at UGA, and he's just, the few times he's come to the Catholic Center, he's been like, oh, I don't know, these guys are kind of weird, they're not cool, I don't want to hang out. And then a couple of our friends ended up going to her house, and they spent the day there, and her brother was there, and he was like, man, those guys were so cool. And she's like, yeah, I know, they're my friends from the Catholic Center. So I think it's a stereotype of like only weird, overly religious people practice their faith. But the reality is, all of the coolest people I know practice their faith. And I think an important thing too is just the authenticity that people who are striving to live out their faith have compared to people who aren't. They're not afraid to be themselves. That's what I've witnessed, and like my strongest friendships are with people who are Christian, because I can see that authenticity in them, and we can go deeper than just the surface level of what's your major, and like, oh, are you going to the social on Friday? Like, no, there's so much more to life than that. And additionally, I think, yeah, the reality is, of course, college. Like, I go to UGA. We have the most bars per capita in the country. But I think there's also a way to healthily participate in that culture. I'm 22. I like to go out for a drink every once in a while, and there's no harm in that as long as I'm practicing it in moderation. And additionally, like, there are so many other fun things to do in a college town besides partying or besides hookup culture. There's so much more. So yes, there are normal people who practice their faith.
Well, I don't know how normal you can get.
True.
Aerospace engineering.
Yeah.
Weirdos.
But I mean, like, I think a good question is, why isn't like practicing a certain way, being like following your faith, being a certain way, staying away from certain things, why is that considered not normal? I think that's a better question. And like a lot of people that I know are awesome people. You know, you can go have fun, you can actually do something interesting on a weekend, and it doesn't have to be like the same thing that everyone else thinks, which is, like Rachel said, and I know a lot of people in college agree, is go to a frat party and like have fun, you know? But there's so many other different activities. Like, you can join the intramural sports that can be like hosted, and you can join a team that's part of the Catholic Center. You can join a lot of people who are doing interesting things aside from the everyday Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, and like do something interesting with them. There's so many different options besides in the stereotypical normal college life that are like at your disposal. Literally, like 100 clubs you can join in college. So why would you like allocate only your time to one specific thing that you assume everyone has to do it, right? Other than that, it's not much experience.
Can I add on to that? And honestly, from the people that I know who have participated in that party life, like Thursday through Saturday night, they are out at the bars. It gets exhausting. Like, I have friends who participated in that and they had their fun, but got sick of it because it's not fulfilling. And like the relationships that you have when the only reason you are friends is because you're drinking buddies or because you go out together, those friendships aren't fulfilling. And once people start to realize that, then they're like, wait, there's more than this. I can actually have a meaningful conversation with someone. I can join a group. I can do this and that. And additionally, I also want to advocate for, like, there are also so many awesome things to do on campus that aren't even faith-based, because especially at big schools like UGA and Tech, there is so much to offer on the campus. And when people say the college experience, like, the college experience is so much more than just Greek life or partying. Like, one, we're going to college for an education, even though maybe we don't always feel like that. But there's so much to learn, so much to explore, and it's also just such a beautiful time of like self-exploration and learning about yourself and about the world. So the college experience is way more than just drinking.
Just to add, like, again, this fidelity to reality and like following it is like, does it actually give what it promises, right? One of my favorite questions to ask is like, how's that working out for you? Not in like a snarky way, but like genuine curiosity. Like, does this give what it promises? Is life more life in following this, right? And what, like again, once they see this like fidelity to reality as it is, and not just like a problem, but like we don't say like morality is not a problem with rules, it's fidelity to reality, right? It's not like a hockey game where you check somebody so they put you in a penalty box, right? Like, it's deeper than that. Like, there's more going on. Like, these things don't actually give what they promises, and they like hollow out life. And so my thing for him is like, does it work? Like, okay, like it was fun in the moment, but what happened after that? Like, was the next day, like, were you able to look upon your life with curiosity and interest? It's like, no, you know? So like, for me, again, it's this insistence upon like looking honestly. So it's like, all right, maybe this idea of college experience is in some way like actually like not fulfilling, and it's perpetuating something. And it's just like you do it because you do it, right? I think a question in front of like couples for marriage is like they have an image of like what the perfect wedding is. But then you ask them like, what do you desire your wedding to say to people? And then the gestures change because they're like, we want people to know like the experience of like the love of God or the beauty of this. And so it's like, all right, let's do gestures that reveal that reality instead of just doing what everybody else is doing, right? And so again, it's this inviting to like, let's honestly look at these things together, because there are so many fun things to do on campus. You can do some like really cool things, and you can learn some amazing things. And so I'm convinced that the faith is supposed to make like life more interesting, and to make us more alive, and even to like risk more in a like, you know, a proper way. But it's actually meant to make us more alive, not less. And so we can't live the faith where it's like all of the like secular stuff minus the fun. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what this is. We're playing by a whole different game. And so this like fearless looking in front of reality, like, does this actually give what it promises, or is this actually like an escape that ultimately says reality is bad? Because my students, especially the guys, like deep down they don't want to run away. So when you see that a lot of their idea of fun is running away from life, you gotta reckon with that, you know? Is this actually is this like what I actually desire, or is this more of giving in than just saying yes? That is an interesting question.
Thank you. Oh, what? Yes.
This has been awesome. I have 4 children, from high school to graduated college. I wish we had that earlier, this panel, but to round it off, if we had a student that had fallen right in that would kind of complete this, because my question is, you guys are awesome. I wish you were my children. This is, I guess, questions for the experts here. What is your advice to parents for children that have stepped away from their faith beyond prayer, because I've done the prayer, and beyond asking, have you been to the Catholic Center? Have you been to Mass? What other advice would you give to somebody who's watching their children walk away?
It's a real question.
Couple comments. One, we have to be faithful to our own conversion journey and really look at, like, for me, I think we often think of the problem of patience as like, I just need to be more patient, right? That's not actually a thing, right? The interesting question is like, what helps you grow in patience? And for me, it's the experience of someone being patient with me, right? Like Jesus saying, be merciful because your heavenly Father is merciful, meaning the experience of mercy. I think we often betray the method of God in the sense of we want to solve the problem right away, or we are changed through an experience and then we try to explain it to someone instead of helping them to walk a road. And there's a pedagogical betrayal of method in that, right? And so the first thing is like how did I get to where I know him? And recognizing how much time it took and how many like people walked with us and how patient and merciful God was. And I think this shifts the way that we're in front of them, right? And instead of it being our trying to like solve the problem, it is a like striving to like love them, help them to be in front of reality, pray for them, ask the Lord to send them people, ask other people to pray for them, and not in a like pejorative way, but a genuine. And yeah, I'm sure that there's more that like you could add, but I think for me, and this is like something I see a lot with parents, and it's so painful. Again, even this problem reveals something very mysterious, that God loves our freedom, and he risks on our freedom. And we almost try to like educate or reform people in a way of dodging the problem of man's freedom. Again, to create a system so perfect, no one needs to be good. So the first thing is fidelity to the method of God of education to freedom. There's a great book called The Risk of Education by Luigi Giussani, who says the problem of education is educating one to like the fragile hand of freedom. But it's a very painful thing, and again, you go into the experience of like St. Monica praying for like Augustine all those years. Augustine was so irritated by Monica. He recognized that she was a saint at the end, but like he like purposely dodged her numerous times, right? And so part of it too is even recognizing like I didn't fully appreciate my parents, like fully recognize like their goodness until I was like 24, if I'm being honest. So even in seminary, I was just like, oh, like why do they call me? You know what I mean? You just don't recognize. Like you have to recognize the journey. So the more faithful we are to our journey, and like living the certainty of the goodness of Christ and that he loves them more than we do, and this like infinite patience, and then being faithful to our experience of what it was like to remember what it was like to be young and what like our position was, it creates this like mercy and understanding. And then it's like, what am I called to do, and to not step past that. So the temptation is always to go around the method of God and almost be like Peter, like protecting Jesus by like, I will kill for you to keep you from dying. And Jesus is like, hey, I'm here to hand myself over. So we can be like that. So fidelity to our own journey, I think, is like a crucial point.
Yeah. You know, each person worships something ultimately. And an idol is that thing or person we turn to that only belongs to God's allegiance, and we're all guilty of that at times. And for those that are on that wayward path, and maybe they were not in the faith to begin with, and they're just struggling, I think the active patience that you mentioned is you're patient and you're always available, like the father of the prodigal son, but you're praying and they know that you will always be there to welcome them, to run to meet them, even with the open arms. But I think not to minimize the power of God at work through people in prayer to put those people in their lives. And it just may be that, and of course as parents we try to strategize and you're thinking, well, what is my son into? Who can I meet that's into that hobby or whatever? And how can we get them to line up and go rock climbing or whatever? But as a parent, I've done that. You know what I mean? And so I'm like, I'll do everything I can, but ultimately I'm depending on God really to work, to do that. And just to know that no one is beyond God's reach, and then just to never give up. And and I mean, I know that I may not answer your question because it's hard when we see our children wandering like that. But to me, there's no wasted pain, and without our own wounds, where would our power be? So I think, the women that I mentioned at the country club and that, as I was talking to the two, they were like, well, what in the world would God do with us? And I said, well, did you have any young people in your life, any other girls that are neighbors or siblings or cousins, they said, oh yeah. And I said, well, what if they went down that path that you're on? And they were on the path of addiction. I said, wouldn't you, out of love, just try to be there for them and say, no, there's a better way with this? Absolutely. And I said, and what's so beautiful is the thing that you're ashamed of, that you want to hide and not talk about, that you're still working through, that's going to be part of your ministry, because you can relate to those people that have been down that journey that I never could. And they thought, oh, wow. And so they were able to see that God will even use that. And so whoever the child is that's running, God's pursuing them. And we just can't give up. And I think I'm telling you, we see it historically, we see it in our own lives and families, what a testimony it will be, right? So thanks for asking. That's a really important and hard question.
Can I actually add something?
Yeah.
I don't know if this might scare you or console you, but also my brother, he doesn't practice the faith at all. But I'm like mega involved in my faith. Obviously, I'm here. So it's not, I guess, for parents, like, at the end of the day, it's not all you. So I don't think you should carry that guilt. If you are carrying that guilt, if that's a lie, it's not your fault that your child isn't choosing to practice the faith. But additionally, someone told me that even though maybe we aren't going to be the ones to convert our family, like whether it's your son or your daughter, for me it's my brother, a friend, maybe we aren't the ones who are called to convert them, but like you both mentioned, pray for the person who actually will be able to speak to them and get through to them. But additionally, like, we are equipped to meet the people that others can't also.
Yeah.
So like, as we continue to strive in our faith, being witnesses to the people, like to the children of other people who have fallen away. Like it's not just your family, even though like obviously your family, it's the most important to you. Like we are witnesses to everyone.
I mean, there's not much I could say. If you find a solution, tell me, because I would love to know. There's a lot of stuff in my future too, so this might help me as an alumni and like a young person going on. But I mean, yeah, like one of the biggest things is if you can't do it yourself, you're not alone. The faith is like worldwide, so anyone could be that like open hand, open that door, and bring them back. And just have faith, really. Like we've always been saying, there's not much more to it. Thank you.
So, are there any more questions before we close? Excellent. I'm sure our panelists would be willing to answer more personal questions if you didn't want to talk to them afterward as well. But final question, lightning round. What's one thought you want to leave with our audience this evening? You guys are ready to go.
Okay.
So, I think we talked a lot about like finding that way of when you graduate and you enter college, you want to find that like group of people. You're focused on like being that like, or finding that group of people, being able to find where you can find God, stuff like that. But it's just as important to be that like welcoming hand. Like don't just search out for like people to welcome you, search for people to bring in. So if you can't like, I guess, if you have any struggles joining that small bubble, create your own, bring people to yourself. If you graduate, get older, be like Anthony to me, reach out, call them as early as you can so they find those groups of people early and are like strong in the faith and stay for like the rest of college and longer. The sooner you work, the better. So I already know like who's graduating and who's coming to Georgia Tech, maybe. I'll be in touch. But but yeah, so like be that open hand and look for people as much as they're looking for you. That's literally as important, and that's what we're here for. We're here to bring people in and just be fishers of men.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my piece of advice is to trust in the promises of the Lord. Read Isaiah. But also, Divine Mercy Sunday was this past Sunday. So I know for me, with my friends and family who aren't in the church, trusting that through our baptism, we are marked as children of God. And the Lord is a father who does not want to abandon his children. So just trusting in that divine mercy and all of the promises the Lord has for us, that he just wants goodness for us. He wants to fulfill the desires of our hearts. He wants us to just grow in love and to know him and serve him. So for any parents who are fearing their children going off to college, or parents who have children straying away from the faith, just trust, surrender them to the Lord and pray that they can open their eyes to the way the Lord is working in their life, because as we said, the Lord is working in their life. It's just a matter of noticing how and where he is.
The oldest person that I knew personally was my wife's grandmother, who lived to be 103. We had her 102nd birthday party, which we would gather annually for the big birthday. And I thought, let me just ask her for advice about life, because she obviously did something right. And she'd be quick to tell you that she said, it wasn't my dipping snuff all these years or drinking a shot of whiskey each week that allowed me to live this long, but it may have had something to do with it. So don't take that advice. But I just said, but what other advice could you give me? And she said, 102 years is a long time, but compared to eternity, it's very short. She said, you need to always live your life each day with an eye on eternity. And I think about what St. James in chapter 4 that says that life's a vapor or a mist, and it's here and then it's gone. And so all these struggles, all these challenges, it's just so brief, it's so temporary, that each person is not only made in the image of God, but has an eternal destination. And that's what the good news is about, is to know how they can be reconciled to God and be with him forever. So that would be my advice, is to live your life knowing that's true, and that is our ultimate purpose of the Great Commission.
Yeah, with that, to pay attention, right? In prayer, in life, we learn how to say yes to God in the future by saying yes to what he's asking of us now, right? Like, prayer is attentiveness to God in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, like asking the Lord every day for openness to what he's asking of us, and then paying attention to your circumstances now. They matter. Like, the circumstances are the necessary precondition for our conversion. So like this attentiveness in prayer, but in like daily life, which we tend to gloss over.
So why don't we end with a prayer? Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord Jesus, we love you. We are yours, and yours we want to be. We thank you for the gift of our faith, for all the experiences that have led us to where we are in our own faith journeys. We pray for each one of the children of the people in this room. Pray for the futures of all of our students and alumni, all of the youth that are under our care in one way or another. May they pay attention. May they find their Ambroses along the way. May we be those Ambroses in as much as you allow us to be, Lord. May we also feel that call to be apostles, to bring people close to you, Lord, through our witness, through our prayer. We entrust all of those young people to your sacred hearts, your merciful hearts, knowing that you love them so much more than we do. We entrust them to the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary as we pray. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Christ our King, thy kingdom come. Mother most pure, pray for us. Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. We have a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all for being here. Have a great night. God bless you all.
You too, Father.